What's going on, everybody? Not the smoothest intro there, but today is March 19, 2024. Hey, they're not all winners. I didn't have the screen up. I didn't do the music right. It's March 19, 2024. You're listening to the Daily AI Show live. I'm Brian. Today we got June, Beth, and Andy, as well as myself. We'll see if anybody else pops in the door. And today we are talking about worms. And what do we mean by worms? We're actually really talking about AI malware. You knew it was coming. If you hadn't heard about it before, you had to know that people were going to exploit and abuse AI. Of course, we've already seen a lot of that over the last year, and we'll talk about that. And where some people are doing some research. That's where the worms part comes in, and what they're doing in highly controlled environments. But you know, the extra to that is like right now it's in a controlled environment and tomorrow it might not be. So that's what today's conversation is about, is the what do we have coming up in the world of AI malware? I don't know, Beth, do you want to kind of kick this off with where this idea came from? And then we can kind of jump into all sorts of things like jailbreaking and prompt injection and all these things, and what new tools like Claude Opus is doing about it. So lots to talk about.
Right. So this was an article in sorry, Jen's comment just came up. Let's get squirmy and uncomfortable. Yes,
love it,
100%.
Jen. We're here for it. Let's do it.
Also, the break in the music at the beginning of the show may or may not have been caused by AI malware. We cannot confirm.
Thank you. Yes, that is what happened. We'll have to look into that. Jimmy, remember, we have to look into that weird malware at the beginning of the show.
I'll have to put a monitor on that, everything. Yep.
And not just my inability to click the right button. 160 plus shows in, I still can't click the buttons in the right order. It's amazing.
They listen to the show every day. Don't you think you should too, right? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was an article that was posted in Ars Technica, and it was talking about research that's done. So this was not like bad actors were discovered doing this. This was researchers who said, "Hey, we did this super easy for researchers to do." And the difference. So I guess there are two pieces of this. One is just like generic malware, the old-fashioned kind, is super easy to write now because you don't have to be a coder to create that. As we know, most AI systems can code. You may have to trick it in order to tell it to do something that is obviously malware. But the second piece comes into this agentic or self-modulating or self-understanding kind of thing that we're seeing as we move forward. So part of what this is talking about is malware that can adjust itself to remain undetected and spread further.
Yeah, they did a good job in this. They have a little video now. It's like an AI voice generated sort of summary video. So kind of interesting because we deal with this all the time, and honestly the video like is a little bit lacking, you know, because it's sort of just redundant, but they did have some visuals, so I'll give them credit. And while it happens to be a Trump image as well as a Black Friday sale, there's nothing political about it. They're just showing an example. But what was interesting to me, Beth, was when they were talking about these worms, or this is being injected into images. And so what we have here is an actual multimodal problem, and that is scary. That is scary to think that transcripts that are sitting behind videos, that images with, I'm assuming, the metadata. I'm not quite even sure how that would work. I'm not smart enough to know how that would be done, obviously. But basically what they were showing here was, if I had shared that Trump 2024 image with you, or let's just use the Black Friday one to stay off politics, the Black Friday one with you, Beth, what it was doing was self-replicating. Every single person that got that image, there was prompt injection that then sent it out, could get into your contacts and things like that. So malware, but it's doing it through prompts that are repeating themselves over and over and over again. Really, really like interesting stuff that I, again, in a controlled environment, but it won't be forever, right?
Right. And the idea was that your email systems have AI built into them, right?
Mm.
So that is also part of this. But what it reminds me of is everybody who used Excel or Sheets for the last 120 years knew that you should turn macros off and only turn macros on when you knew what you were going to run and you wanted to run something, because within spreadsheets macros could be embedded and then run automatically on their own. This reminds me of that same kind of situation, although I don't know, like, are we just like AI don't read images for me? I'm not sure what that is, but it reminds me of that kind of thing.
Well, that's interesting, and something I'd like to get your guys' opinion on this, because in doing research for this show today, which by the way is the best reason to have this show, is it gets you to do research in a whole bunch of areas and become smarter. I love that part of doing this show. When I was researching it, I was curious with Claude was saying about it, because I figured, oh, that's like the most recent news. We just saw them come out with Opus and Haiku and Sonnet, the middle one, Opus being the highest, Haiku being the quickest, fastest, smallest, and Sonnet being the free middle. And what they were saying, which made sense to me, is like, oh, well, one thing you could do is you could, and I could probably get it up here on the screen, like mitigating it, you can create a harmlessness screen prompt. And what they were saying is, like, use something like a fast model like Claude 3 Haiku to implement a harmlessness screen to evaluate the appropriateness of the user's input before processing it. And so they were
Nice.
suggesting that these lighter, faster models like Haiku could be used to do this type of task work, which I think, Andy, I don't know, you or Jimmy, I'd love to hear your comments on this. Like, we've talked about this. I know, Andy, I've heard you talk about it too, about, there's not one LLM to rule them all. There's these models that are lightweight and fast, and they're good for certain things and not great for others. But here you go. Here's a great example of having a light, fast model, or something like a Grok, which I was just talking about in a LinkedIn post today, that might be perfect for this type of checking before things go out, so that the user doesn't really have to do anything else. It's being done as part of an evaluation system, which, I don't know, Beth, we were talking about that last year, right? Writing about evaluation. Yeah. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anybody on that?
Well, I'll say about the lightweight models. These models are very proficient and good, but they are narrow in their sort of extensive reasoning capability. They're not going to go outside the box, so to speak. But if you give them very explicit instructions, and one of them might be evaluate based on this data that I've already supplied you with examples of multiple types of malware exploits. I want you to evaluate all of the inflowing things, and it can execute those instructions very, very quickly and inexpensively. And that's a lightweight, purpose-built model. You might start with something like Haiku, for example, in Claude, and then train it expressly for the purpose of defeating the very sophisticated AI-enhanced malware that's going to be coming. Though it's nice to know that there are some researchers who are putting out examples of it so that we have awareness of it, because the real nefarious actors out there are already at work with AI and exploiting typical kinds of phishing attacks by enhancing the quality of them and the imperceptibility of it being a phishing attack, all the way up to and including, as we heard in the news recently, this an amazing exploit that went beyond phishing email. Right, the worm actually used an email with a retrieval augmented generation poison attack to the data that's coming out of it, but then used those emails to self-replicate. So it got the email system to send out another email to somebody in the contacts with the worm included in it. So that's this propagation part of it. Well, when it would be nice to have an AI to identify that, but now take this kind of AI enhanced exploit all the way to the Zoom call that got the bad actors millions and millions of dollars, where this poor lower level person was on a Zoom call with her CFO, which was being articulated using cloning, was being articulated by a bad actor who then invited lots of other people from the company at the high level who were also on the Zoom call. And so she could not tell that this
Right.
was not, her team telling her to do these multiple, $1 million transfers to various accounts. That would have given me a little pause. Like, why are we sending it to all these different accounts? But anyway, it was very successful exploit. Why? Because of the sophistication of AI cloning used by people who did like a Ocean's 11 kind of hit, right? They what do they call that? The Ocean's 11. It's like there's was it called?
That was Ocean's 11, the movie. Yeah, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, there's a term of art for when you have a scam that you're pulling off on someone. What is that?
Yeah, okay. It's a heist. It's a heist movie. Yeah,
a heist movie. Okay, right. But I thought that even in the show they had a term for what they're doing. Hey, you're in on this.
What the criminal moniker was for what they pulled.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Anyway, I can't
that's
remember.
a side note.
But anyway, so yeah, now we want to have AI systems to evaluate whether or not the Zoom call you're on is actually being perpetrated by a host of bad actors who are simulating interactions with people you know. That's going to get really, really tricky out there. So that's the future that we have to deal with.
It's true. I think, well, first of all, the process might be new, right? Because it's a new technology, but the act is not new. You know, like Jen actually has a great comment. Not an AI chain letter, right? Totally, Jen. This is exactly that example. You know, it's like, oh no, don't worry. This does not have malware attached to it as part of an image. You know, and hiding information in images is not new either. I think it's called steganography, where where you hide information in an image, and that's been around for a while, right? Even in the modern day, where you would essentially hide or encrypt information within an image, and when the image gets transferred, you know, there's no obvious information there. It was a great way to send information to other people. But my point is, these are all existing bad actions for bad actors, and they're just perpetuating the new process. I agree with Andy that the probable solution will be an AI solution to an AI problem or an AI vulnerability. I do like the idea of specifically trained AI, or maybe even a mixture of experts to analyze each stage of a process. That might slow things down. There might be, there's probably other solutions for it, but the ability to identify the intended purpose. And I think that's where the tricky part is, right? Is to identify, it's like, oh, there's this other part. Normally we don't, you know, it's like Star Wars. It's an older code, sir. I was about to let them through. You know, it's not important to the AI that it goes through, but the other AI who's doing the double checking, it's like, that wasn't part of the original intent. And I think once they figure that out, that will help mitigate this. But to let everybody know, this is probably the starting signal for the constant one-upmanship of security versus bad actors. It's ongoing. It's not going to stop, and this is probably just the first major story that we've heard about it.
And I think that one of the things I read, and this goes back to, like, this is an answer for everything, right, Jimmy? Which is like, what's one of the possible solutions for this? What's one of the answers? And inevitably, I don't care where you put that, Perplexity or anywhere else, it's going to say education. Education is one of the first lines of defense. And I'll put myself in that. Years ago, this is probably 2017, 2018, got one of the text messages, hey, from such and such CEO, I'm busy right now in a meeting. The thing was, at that time, number one, had never seen that before. I'm an intelligent individual. I was still in my 40s at that time. Wasn't that long ago. Maybe 39, maybe 40. And I saw it. I was driving home from work. My CEO was traveling. He was with clients, and it sort of lined up. Now I caught on after a couple back and forths because of how impatient the text coming back to me was, and that's what actually raised the red flag for me. But I think we're all here saying, like, I would see that coming. I would see that coming. Now, this cut to 2024, I get a text message from my CEO, from Jake, I don't know, about once every 2 weeks, there's a new one. And it's the same thing. I'm busy. Can you get me right? It's the same thing over and over again. And now there's more education out there. And of course, no, we're not going to do that. You check the domain. You do things like this that you learn. But with AI, yeah, people better get educated quick, because they have to know you could get not a text message. You might get a video of your CEO telling you in the video to go do this thing that I need you to do. And it could cause other issues if it's shared or whatever. Hey, I'm really busy. Can you take this quick image or video and share it with the team on Slack? And now you get some sort of jailbreak or prompt injection that has, wait, I'm going to say the word, steganography.
Steganography. Yeah.
Stegno.
Oh.
Stegosaurus. Think Stegosaurus and then steganography.
I love that you all said it so fast, and I tried 3 times and couldn't nail the word. That's how you know this isn't AI. I'm not right. Okay, that made me laugh. Anyway, I should not have tried that. But my point to it was that, we're all super smart when we've seen it happen. So I would never, and a little bit and there's a little bit of hubris that needs to come with it. But it's just like, oh yeah, you could. I mean, there's got to be somebody that's the CEO of the bank company that gives away $1 million or whatever it was. There's always got to be a one. So I don't know. I just think education is such a huge part of it. Shows like this are such a huge part of it. You just have to know it's possible, so that your spidey sense kicks off when something weird comes across and you go, oh, that actually may not be real, even though I'm looking and listening to the person that I know with a backdrop of the place I know they're in, like Austin or something like that, where my CEO lives, right? It's weird. It's weird that we have to be of that level right now, because like you said, Jimmy, this is the beginning of whack-a-mole of, catch up, new malware, catch up, new malware, and,
So one of the things that I want to point or just like highlight in this is that what we're familiar with is, oh no, it's going to replicate, right? Like, it's going to take systems down because it's going to replicate. It's going to do stuff really, really fast. The reason that it replicates really fast is to increase the likelihood that someone who is a good mark is going to be vulnerable, right? So while this also is replicable, Brian, what you're saying, I'm like, do you know how easy it would be to say, hey, I'm sorry, I should have just called you, right? I'm Jake. Yeah, this is not a good, like, there's more that I want to say. I should have just called you. And now you get a call from a phone number you don't recognize, but you were just exchanging text with your CEO. Your CEO has done enough video that that their voice print has been done.
easily.
And now that's a phone call that you're having. And that is like ready now. That is totally possible for, I don't know, it's more than $1.50, but it's less than 100.
And, and that's one of the shows we have coming up next week, right? Which is about speed. It's just about how fast these language models are getting, or Grok, which I was just talking about earlier. These things are going to become near instantaneous. And so this idea of there being a lag in the conversation where you go, well, that's weird. Why would they take so long to respond as Jake? That's going to get so small that it's going to be inconsequential from the end users that it won't trigger your brain to go, that's not a conversation happening in real time. I just asked them, and then there was this weird pause, and then I got a response, and that doesn't sound real to me. And so we're very good at picking up on that. That's going to go away. We know this is going to go away. I don't know. And here's my other question too. I am not well versed in blockchain. I'm not. But what I do understand about it is the idea of checks and balances and how it has to go across the ledger and things like that. And maybe one of you guys can speak better to this. I almost wonder if there's a blockchain solution in here where businesses will basically be checking the prompting, the injections, different things like this through like a blockchain type technology where it's being tested. Because Jimmy, what you said was got me thinking of this was like, oh, that wasn't the original instructions. That's not what was in the original, whatever. And a blockchain would be able to solve for that because you wouldn't have been able to edit the original instructions. It would have been diversified. Am I totally blowing that out of the water? Is that right?
No, that's essentially what a ledger tech would be designed for, is to provide you that provenance or authenticity. And so you'd use that or a similar type of technology to increase your security level and whatever your protocols are. Excuse me. And so, sorry about that. So yeah, so you use that kind of technology to provide that authenticity for whatever your exchanges are. So if it's just like how you have multi-factor authentication now with, your authenticator app or your security key. And so you would probably need to, or what we'll see is just increased security protocols whenever taking a certain priority of action or a certain level of action, right? So for the example of releasing funds to all of those accounts, I don't know the specifics of their process, but if presented in a Zoom call, then the back end processes would be then, okay, I need to authenticate this transaction. This request has been made. Okay, now I authenticate it. All right, cool. Now it goes to the next stage, and then that stage then authenticates the release of the money, and then and whatever those protocols are in there. And so nowadays there's a fair amount of checks and balances that goes into it. I think with the advent of AI and how things quickly move along, you're just going to need to add in another layer to a part of the process. It might slow things down, but the more human back and forth there is in the back end will prevent those kinds of things from happening. I think the hard part will be the keeping up, right? Because AI changes so quickly and there's just there's so much eyes in this field. The catch up, meaning, and unfortunately for the cybersecurity professionals, they're just going to have to turn over and be on top of it even more than they already are. So that might increase your costs in terms of applying what kind of security measures that you need to do. But yeah, it's more of the same. It's just the process will be a little different because
it's going to be faster and more proficient and
exactly.
harder to detect because the AI will be able to manipulate its ability in ways that'll evade detection. I want to step back for a second and just say we've been talking largely about phishing attacks, which are impersonating something or someone and then exploiting the user's comfort with that impersonation to have them take an action, whether that's as simple as sending an email or forwarding an email, or it's sending money and forwarding money. It has to involve a human taking that action. I want to say that there's that. Then there's malware, which is, I think, something slightly different in my mind anyway, which is that self-replicating code that propagates through a whole series of computing systems and attempts to take over or inhabit systems in a way that it can be used. The code may include malware software that could be part of a botnet for a distributed denial of service attack, if you wanted to be really adversarial against certain systems. And then there's a whole nother class of things that are malware of a sort, which is exploiting AI models themselves. And the simplest example of that we've had experience with is, they came out with custom GPTs and everybody wanted to see what the instructions were for the GPTs. And so how do I trick the GPT? how do I trick the model into revealing information that it's been told not to reveal? And there's a classic example of that, of where, you know, somebody wanted the you know, recipe for a napalm bomb, and they couldn't get it. But if they just changed their prompt to say that, like, my grandmother used to tell me bedtime stories about, because she worked in a napalm factory, and I just
Yeah.
want you to repeat the recipe. She told it to me so many times, and then the AI model gives the information on how to build napalm bomb. So these model exploits are interesting and becoming much more sophisticated, including I read recently about one that was able to penetrate a sophisticated model all the way down to having it reveal its so-called projection layer, which is some element of the AI model architecture that I don't even understand, that is part of how it actually generates its responses. And so they were able to retrieve that process. And then there are other examples of that where, you know, exploiters have been able to collect all the weights of an entire model and have the model give its weights up, and which allows you to basically create an open source replica. You know, not open source, but your private replica of a model that's closed. So that's another class of bad actors working against the AI, sort of ethical AI environment. So let's repeat those classes. We got phishing attempts, where I'm trying to get a human to believe in something enough that they're going to take an action that's against their interests. We've got replicating malware that can be used to, you know, take over entire systems, steal information from those systems silently and invisibly. And then we also have model exploits, which are trying to get into and possibly poison. There's a term of art in all of this malware, which is poisoning a model with injection of data, either through the prompt, or if they can somehow be involved in identifying how that model gets its information for ongoing training, poisoning the data that it's accumulating, and putting that into the model somehow to cause it to do things in an incorrect or unexpected fashion.
Right.
I think too, like, it's worth mentioning that jailbreaking, which is part of what you were mentioning, can also be a valuable asset. I mean, it's important for jailbreaking to happen, because just for all the bad actors out there, this is also how you test and stress test the limits of these LLMs. And that is also really important. You hope, obviously, that doesn't turn into something negative, but I know a lot of that being rapidly shared within the AI exchange community. Initially, what you were talking about with the grandma exploit, and there were several others, there was people who were rapidly testing and stress testing within that community, really even before OpenAI seemed to have a handle on it. They've sort of tampered down some of those abilities, but had it not been for that group and getting them to do that, I wouldn't know what type of instructions to put on the back end of the custom GPT to stop people from doing it. So there is, you know, there's that benefit. And of course, we've seen this across the way, where you have, you know, you have companies that put up bounties essentially for breaking their system. They're like, go stress test it. And thank God we have people who are that talented with coding and things like that, who are for good, because you need them to go just push these to the absolute limits of their capabilities, get the weights, whatever the case is. I don't know, as we wrap up today, what do you guys think? I mentioned, obviously, awareness, education. We can kind of put those together. Those are two of the biggest ones. Obviously, keeping up with, like, we talked about Claude. We're going to be talking about Claude next week. On Friday, when we do our new review, talking about the 3 different models. But Anthropic and the way they do things, because they have a constitution, and that's different from getting, like, necessarily human feedback on it. So what are companies like that doing? Is it safer to maybe use an Anthropic? These are all things people could do for, like, their own education and research. But what else would you guys suggest as we wrap up on, you know, ways that companies can kind of stay on top of this to their best of the ability today?
So one of the things I want to build on that was you just sort of generally said you could ask Claude to detect whether this is at an acceptable level of harmless. And part of why you can do that is because Claude is trained with harmless as a concept from the very beginning. With the other systems, you would need to spend a fair amount of time defining what harmless is in the context, right? Like this kind of harm is okay, and this kind of harm is not okay. And Claude has really done that from its constitutional AI in the beginning. I also think that this is another pitch for having an AI team, because it's going to be too much for one individual, or like having a diverse AI team, one individual or one, like it's just your tech folk, right? I mean, you want somebody who's like fascinated with images. You want someone who's fascinated with like the way these things get put together. Like diversity is your friend in this context, because there's not just going to be one stream of information that's giving you a heads up about what's changing. Hire theater majors.
Yeah. Beth, I think you really hit on the idea of having a cross-team cooperation or cross-team leadership. If there's some people who can work interdepartmentally, who are focused on various aspects of or point of view for how AI is used in the company, I think that's a great position. But it does all go back to literacy and education, right? You definitely need to be aware so that you can implement steps to help combat these kinds of issues. And that'll be a constant cost of doing business, is being on top of what the latest changes are.
Nice.
And go ahead, Andy, and then I'll throw Greg's comment up here in a second.
Just a quick thought, which is, back in the day, you had a whitelist and blacklist, emails, or I forget what the general purpose of whitelist and blacklist were, but maintaining an understanding in your team of what the typical current exploits are and having things added to that blacklist is really important. I think we've all become aware now of the exploit where, the text from the CEO comes asking for you to do something urgently, and that never happens in real life, right? But it's convincing. So generate and circulate a blacklist of all the things that are familiar. And here's another $1 million idea. We should generate it here at the Daily AI Show. We'll collect all those things and distribute it free. I'm not sure how that makes $1 million, but anyway.
You're slipping on that $1 million idea, Andy.
Worth $1.
Engagement. It's all about engagement, right, Andy? There you go.
Well, as we wrap up and sort of taking us on to future show ideas, Greg, thank you, Greg, for all your wonderful comments, as always, Jen as well. But Greg said agents will create a whole new set of issues, because no longer will the phishing just be targeting people. It will target agents that can act independently. Dun, dun, dun. So we have more conversations to have about this. Obviously, thank you, Greg. I think that's a valid point. Tomorrow we have the news. Thursday, we're going to be talking about AI hype versus reality. I'm really looking forward to that one. Friday is our bi-weekly recap show. And then next week, we're going to be talking about things like Apple's MM1 infrastructure and what they have going on there. We're going to be talking about AI getting faster. We're going to be talking about Claude on Friday, some news, and like the secret clubs of AI, all the stuff that we keep seeing but we can't get access to. We'll be talking about that next week as well. So keep on coming back. We have tons of great content coming up over the next 2 weeks. We would love to see you here. We'd love to see you hanging out in the comment section like Jen and Greg, and bringing your thoughts to the conversations as well. That's it for us. We will see you guys tomorrow. Let me see if I can do this in the right order. Here we go. Splash screen. Music.
Oh.